is 100% fiction. All elements are imaginary. Coincidences with reality are accidental. But 18. Entertainment only. The dress was a statement. Demi understood that the moment it arrived, boxed, ribboned, delivered by a woman in white gloves who smiled the way people smile when they're paid to. It was the kind of dress that said, "This has already been decided," before the bride had a single word in the matter. White, impeccably cut. Hanging now on the back of her bedroom door like a polite ultimatum. She sat on the edge of her bed in the Calloway estate, still in her jeans, eyes fixed on the window. Below, the grounds of the governor's mansion blazed with light. White tents, catering vans, a string quartet warming up near the East Garden. Guests were already arriving. Black cars, dark suits, the particular brand of smile she'd learned to identify before she was old enough to vote. The notification on her phone had been open for 40 minutes. Governor Calloway and Senator Harwick seal historic alliance. Official engagement announcement confirmed for this evening. She hadn't leaked it. Someone on her father's communications team had sent the press release 3 hours before anyone had bothered to tell her she was the bride in question. 3 hours. The door opened without a knock. Her mother, Patricia Calloway, entered wearing a navy gown and the particular brand of serenity she reserved for situations requiring absolute control. She looked at the untouched dress. She looked at Demi. She exhaled with the precision of a woman who had learned to express disapproval without wrinkling her forehead. "You need to get dressed." "Mom." Demi set the phone face down on the comforter. "I need someone to explain to me what's happening." "You read the announcement." "I read an announcement telling me I'm being engaged to a man I've met exactly once. At a dinner nobody told me was an audition for the position of political wife." She paused. "So yes, I would appreciate an explanation." Patricia sat in the armchair by the window with the posture of someone who had already decided how this conversation would end. "Your life won't change as much as you're imagining. You finish your degree. He's agreed to that. It's a reasonable arrangement." "An arrangement." Demi repeated the word slowly. "You're describing my marriage as an arrangement." "Every marriage is an arrangement, Demi. The honest ones admit it. Mine won't be." Patricia looked up. "Yours," she said with the thin, precise patience of a woman who had already made the decision for someone else, "will happen because your father needs this, because this family needs this, and because you were raised understanding that names like ours carry a price. Tonight is your turn to pay it." The silence that settled between them wasn't the comfortable kind. Demi looked at her mother for a long moment. Then she looked at the dress. "How old were you when you married him?" she asked. Patricia didn't answer. 23, Demi said for her. "And Senator Harwick is how old?" 47 is a perfectly respectable. "I'm not asking if it's respectable. I'm asking if you understand what you're asking me to do. I'm asking you to come downstairs in 40 minutes wearing that dress and a convincing smile." Patricia stood. "The rest you figure out later." And she left. Demi came downstairs with the dress, without the smile. Senator Harwick was stationed near the fireplace in the main hall, bourbon in hand, working the room with the ease of a man who had spent decades making every space feel like it already belonged to him. He was tall, silver at the temples, with the kind of presence that filled a room, not through personality, but through the unshakable certainty that everyone there recognized his importance and agreed it mattered. When he saw her, he smiled. It was a smile of ownership. Subtle enough to read as charming, obvious enough to turn her stomach. "Demi." He crossed to her, took her hand, pressed his lips to her knuckles with the ceremony of a man who had rehearsed this. "You look stunning." "Thank you." The reflex activated before she could stop it. Her father materialized at her side, placed his hand firmly at the small of her back, and began steering the three of them toward the center of the hall, where photographers had already positioned themselves. Photographers. She hadn't seen the photographers. "Dad." She kept her voice low, lips barely moving. "This isn't what we discussed. We discussed that you'd be here. You are." He didn't slow down. "Smile." We didn't discuss anything because nobody asked me anything. Demi, I mean it. So do I. He tilted his head slightly toward her, voice flat and even, the tone he used when closing negotiations. This announcement happens tonight, with or without your cooperation. The difference is what the photographs show. Choose carefully. The camera flash fired before she could respond. It was almost 11 when Demi slipped away to the back veranda. The garden was quiet on that side of the house. The tents and music and the collective hum of satisfied guests all stayed on the other end of the grounds, distant and muffled, and belonging to a world that had very little to do with her at the moment. She stood at the stone railing, palms flat against the cold surface, staring into the dark tree line, and tried to organize the noise in her head using the tools 2.5 years of psychology had given her. Identify the central problem. Her father had decided to negotiate her life without consulting her, with the calm conviction of a man who couldn't conceive of that being questioned. Identify available options. Option 1, comply. Option 2, refuse openly. Option 3, find an exit that didn't burn everything to the ground. Open refusal meant scandal. It meant losing access to the tuition her family controlled, the connections, the infrastructure of her life as she currently knew it. She'd watched her father make people disappear from his orbit with nothing more than a few phone calls. She wasn't naive about what that looked like up close. Compliance meant Senator Harwick. Permanently. Or for however long permanently lasted in political marriages. Which left option 3, the one she hadn't fully mapped yet. You should be inside. She turned. A man stood leaning against the column to her left, arms crossed, glass in hand. Dark suit, no tie, black hair slightly undone, like he hadn't made much effort for the occasion and had no particular interest in pretending otherwise. A tattoo curled up the left side of his neck, dark ink against tan skin, visible above his collar. Not hidden, not flaunted. Simply there, the way details are when someone has long stopped caring what people make of them. She hadn't seen him inside, and she had spent the entire evening cataloging every face in that room. Who are you? She asked directly. He tilted his head slightly as if weighing the question. Antony Reeves. The name meant nothing for exactly 2 seconds. Then it meant everything. Demi had looked up the name Reeves 3 weeks ago, when she first started suspecting that dinner wasn't just social. She'd looked it up because Priya had mentioned, in a conversation about local politics, that Governor Callaway had serious opposition. And that serious opposition in this city sometimes had names that never appeared on ballots, but appeared in everything else. Antony Reeves. 36 years old. Sole heir and operator of one of the most opaque private equity groups in the state. Named in 3 federal investigations over the past 8 years. Indicted once. Acquitted. The press called him a businessman. Everyone understood what that meant. What are you doing here? She asked. Same thing as you? He glanced briefly toward the lit interior of the hall. Avoiding the party. You were invited to Senator Harwick's engagement dinner. I was. Why? He turned his eyes to her with a slowness that wasn't carelessness. It was a choice. The particular kind of calm that came from knowing exactly how much attention each thing deserved. Business, he said simply. Demi studied him for a moment. Dark eyes, sharp jaw, the tattoo tracing a clean line up the left side of his neck. He wasn't the kind of man who tried to seem dangerous. He was the kind who didn't need to try. What kind of business does a man like you have with a senator like Harwick? One eyebrow lifted slightly. A man like me? You know what I mean. I do. He took a slow sip from his glass. And you're direct for someone wearing a wedding dress they clearly don't want to be in. Demi opened her mouth, closed it, looked down at herself. Is it that obvious? You've been gripping that railing like it's the only thing standing between you and a full sprint to the parking lot. A pause. So yeah. She released the railing. Silence settled between them. Inside, someone clinked a glass and called for attention. Her father's voice reached her through the French doors, muffled but unmistakable. The speech she'd heard him rehearse 3 times already. Alliance, family, future. The words bled through the glass, polished and hollow. Demi turned her back to the window. "How long have you known my father?" she asked. "Long enough. Long enough to know he doesn't invite certain people to certain events without a reason." He looked at her with something that might have been interest, if she'd had enough data points yet to read that face accurately. She didn't. Not yet. "You're trying to figure out why I'm here." "I'm trying to figure out if you're an option," she said. The silence that followed was different from the ones before it. He pushed off the column slowly, 2 steps toward her. Stopped at a distance that was technically courteous and entirely intentional. "An option for what?" he asked. Demi looked at him, then at the hall where her father was raising a glass toward Senator Harwick while cameras recorded everything for the morning news cycle, then back at Antony Reeves. And the central problem, the available options, and the third exit she hadn't fully mapped yet, began assembling into a shape that hadn't existed 5 minutes ago. "I don't know yet," she said. "But I'll figure it out." He looked at her for a long moment with that stillness that wasn't indifference. Then, for the first time since she'd noticed him, the corner of his mouth moved. Not quite a smile. The recognition of something unexpected. "Whatever it is," he said. "The answer's probably no." "Probably," she agreed. And neither of them moved. She found his number in 48 hours. It wasn't easy. Antony Reeves didn't have a business card, a public email, or anything resembling a digital footprint that a normal person could follow. What he had was a holding company registered in Delaware, a law firm in Midtown that handled all his communications, and 3 layers of administrative staff specifically designed to make him unreachable. Demi got through all 3 layers by pretending to be a potential investor interested in a real estate acquisition. She was not proud of this. But she was also not engaged to Senator Harwick yet, and the window between not yet and officially was closing at a rate that made pride feel like a luxury. The call lasted 4 minutes. A woman with a professional voice and zero warmth informed her that Mr. Reeves did not take unscheduled calls, that his calendar was managed exclusively through the firm, and that the earliest available appointment was in 6 weeks. 6 weeks was 5 weeks, and 4 days too late. "Tell him," Demi said, "that we met at the governor's party, on the veranda, and that I figured out what I need." A pause. "I'll pass the message along." He called back in 2 hours. The coffee shop was her choice. She'd picked it deliberately. Public, busy. The kind of place where conversations disappeared into ambient noise and nobody looked twice at anyone else. A corner table. She arrived 10 minutes early, ordered a black coffee she didn't particularly want, and spent the time reviewing everything she knew about leverage, negotiation tactics, and the specific psychology of men who were accustomed to being the most powerful person in any given room. He walked in at exactly the agreed time, which surprised her. She had expected him to be late, the kind of late that was a power move, deliberate and readable. Instead, he came through the door at 2 o'clock precisely, scanned the room in under 3 seconds with the efficiency of someone who did that automatically, located her, and crossed the space between them without hesitation. Dark jeans, gray shirt, collar open, the tattoo visible above the neckline. Dark ink, the pattern more intricate up close than it had appeared in the dim light of the veranda. A bird, she realized now, or part of one. Wings that disappeared below the fabric like the rest of the story was private. He sat down across from her without being invited. "You found my number," he said. "I did. That took some effort. Not as much as it should have. You might want to talk to whoever manages your screening process." Something moved behind his eyes. Not quite amusement, the acknowledgement of a point scored. He leaned back in the chair with the relaxed authority of a man who was comfortable everywhere and owned by nowhere. A server appeared. He ordered water. The server left. "So," he said, "you figured out what you need." "I did." "And you need it from me specifically." "Yes." "Why?" Demi wrapped both hands around her coffee cup. Because you were at that party and you shouldn't have been. Which means my father either invited you because he wants something from you, or you invited yourself because you want something from him. Either way, you have a reason to be in that room. And I need someone with a reason. He was quiet for a moment. That's a logical framework, he said. Incomplete, but logical. What's incomplete about it? You're assuming that whatever I want from your father is compatible with what you want from me. He tilted his head slightly. Those are two different calculations. I know. She held his gaze. That's why I'm here. To find out if they overlap. He looked at her the way he had on the veranda. With that measured, unhurried attention that she was beginning to understand wasn't arrogance. It was assessment. He looked at everything that way, like the world was a series of positions on a board, and he was deciding which ones mattered. Talk, he said. She laid it out cleanly. The senator, the political alliance, the engagement announcement that was already circulating in the press, the 3-week window before the formal ceremony planning began, and the exit routes started closing permanently. She didn't perform distress. She didn't ask for sympathy. She presented it the way she'd rehearsed it at 2 a.m, sitting on her dorm room floor, as a problem with a specific set of parameters and a proposed solution. I need someone my father can't dismiss, she said. Someone whose presence in my life creates a complication he has to take seriously. Senator Harwick won't push a claim if there's already a visible, credible one. My father won't risk the optics of a public conflict. You want a shield, Antoni said. I want a reason. Something real enough that the political calculation changes. Silence. He was looking at the table, or past it. She couldn't tell. And in exchange? He asked. What do you want from my father? His eyes came back to her. I asked first. Fair. She'd walked into that. I haven't decided yet, she said honestly. I don't have leverage to offer you yet. What I have is a direct line to the governor's inner circle for as long as this situation lasts. Access, proximity, whatever that's worth to you. Why would you give me access to your father? Because my father is why I'm sitting here. She said it without heat, just fact. The man decided to trade me for a Senate seat without asking my opinion. I'm not feeling particularly protective of his interests right now. Antoni was quiet for a long moment. Outside, the street was loud with the ordinary noise of a Tuesday afternoon. Traffic, voices, the distant rhythm of the city doing what cities do. Inside the coffee shop, the ambient hum of other people's conversations created a kind of privacy. What you're describing, he said finally, is complicated. Yes. There are people in my life who would find your father's interest in my movements problematic. I know what you do. You know what the press says I do. I know what 3 federal investigations and 1 acquittal suggest you do. She met his eyes steadily. I'm not asking you to be something you're not. I'm asking you to be visible, publicly, long enough that the senator's team decides I'm more trouble than I'm worth. He looked at her for a long moment. Then he did something she hadn't expected. He smiled. A real one, brief and slightly reluctant, like it had happened before he could decide whether to allow it. You're in college, he said. Penultimate year. Psychology. Psychology. He repeated it like he was filing it somewhere. That explains the framework. Does it bother you? No. He picked up his water glass. It means you're analyzing me right now. I've been analyzing you since the veranda. And? You're patient in a way that's learned, not natural. You're used to rooms where people want things from you and you've built a specific kind of stillness to make them work for it. She paused. You did it just now. You leaned back the moment you sat down. It's a positioning choice. He looked at her with an expression she couldn't fully categorize. What else? He said. Quiet, not defensive. You ordered water in a coffee shop, which means you either don't want anything that could be traced back to a preference, or you're not staying long and didn't want to waste the order. I think it's the first one. You don't give people data points if you can help it, a beat. The tattoo, she continued, is old. At least 10 years by the fading on the edges. You got it before you were in a position where appearances were negotiable, which means it was a choice made when you were someone different. You kept it because... She stopped. Actually, I don't have enough information for that last part. The silence that followed was the kind she was starting to recognize as his version of being impressed. You'd have made a good interrogator, he said. I want to be a trauma therapist. Even better. She looked at him steadily. Is that a yes or a no? He set the glass down, looked at the window, looked back. It's a not yet, he said. I need to know something first. What? If I do this, whatever version of this we agree on, and your father pushes back hard, and he will. His voice was level, factual. You understand what that looks like from my side. He's the governor. He has mechanisms, and I don't operate in spaces where conflict stays polite. The weight of that landed the way he'd intended. Damie held it for a moment. Let it be real. I understand, she said. Do you? His eyes were steady, not threatening. Asking genuinely. Because you're 22 and this isn't a dorm dispute. The people around me don't do things halfway, and your father won't either once he decides I'm the problem. You need to know that before this goes further. It was the most honest thing anyone had said to her in 3 weeks, which was its own kind of answer. I know what I'm walking toward, she said. I've been watching my father operate since I was 8 years old. I know exactly what he looks like when he's containing something, and exactly what he looks like when he isn't. She met Antoni's gaze without flinching. I'm not naive. I'm out of options. He looked at her for a long moment. Then he nodded. Once. The way decisions look when they've already been made, and the gesture is just confirmation. I'll think about it, he said. How long? 48 hours. I have 3 weeks total. Then 48 hours won't kill you. He stood, unhurried, adjusted nothing about himself. I know where to find you. I found you first, she pointed out. That corner of the mouth movement again. Not quite a smile. The reluctant recognition of something he hadn't anticipated. Yeah, he said. You did. And he walked out. Demi sat with her cold coffee and watched him go. Outside the window, he moved through the afternoon crowd without looking back. Unhurried, unremarkable to anyone who didn't know what to look for, disappearing into the city the way water disappears into water. She pulled out her notebook, wrote 3 words at the top of a clean page: patient, careful, honest. Underlined the last one. Then she wrote, below it, he warned me. Which means he's not planning to lie about what this is. She stared at that sentence for a moment. Yet, she added, closed the notebook, ordered a second coffee, and started planning for 48 hours from now. 3 miles away, in a building whose top 2 floors didn't appear on any public registry, Antoni Reeves stood at a floor-to-ceiling window and looked at the city below. Behind him, his second-in-command and closest advisor, a compact, sharp-eyed man named Colt, leaned against the doorframe. The governor's daughter? Colt said. You're considering it. I'm thinking. Those aren't different things for you. Antoni didn't answer. Outside, the city moved in its usual patterns, traffic and light and the organized chaos of 10 million people who had no idea what happened in buildings like this one. She found your number in 48 hours, he said finally. That's concerning. It's impressive. Colt was quiet for a moment. The governor's been blocking the harbor permits for 14 months, he said carefully. If there was a way inside that conversation. I know. This would be a clean way in. I know that too. Another silence. She's in college, Colt said. Penultimate year, psychology. Antoni. She analyzed me in under 10 minutes. Accurately. He turned from the window. His face gave nothing away, but something behind his eyes had shifted. Schedule nothing for Thursday. Colt straightened. So that's a yes. Antoni walked past him toward the hallway. That's a not yet, he said, and closed the door. He came back in 36 hours, not 48. 36, which meant he'd made the decision in under 2 days and spent the remaining 12 hours deciding whether to tell her that. Demi was sitting in the university library on the 3rd floor when her phone buzzed. No greeting, no introduction, just an address and a time, sent from a number she didn't have saved but recognized immediately. 7 p.m. Come alone. She looked at the message for exactly 4 seconds. Then typed back, dress code? The reply came fast, which told her he'd been holding the phone. Don't be cute. She smiled at the screen in a way she was glad nobody could see. The address was a restaurant in the financial district, the kind of place that had no sign outside, no online presence, and a front door that looked like it belonged to a private residence. The kind of place that existed entirely through reputation and invitation, where the tables were far enough apart that conversations stayed private, and nobody looked up when someone walked in. The maitre d' was expecting her. That detail settled something in her chest that she wasn't entirely ready to examine. Antoni was already seated when she arrived, corner table, back to the wall, sightline to both the entrance and the kitchen door. The positioning was automatic, she realized. He probably didn't even notice he did it anymore. He stood when she approached. She hadn't expected that either. You're early, he said. So are you. I'm always early. Control habit? She asked, sitting down. He sat across from her. Survival habit, he said. There was no performance in it, just fact. The server appeared, poured water, recited nothing because there were no menus. Demi glanced around the room with the peripheral attention she'd been developing since she started paying serious attention to her surroundings, a skill that had sharpened considerably in the past 3 weeks. 4 other tables occupied, 2 men near the window who hadn't looked up when she entered but whose posture had changed slightly, a couple near the far wall who were genuinely focused on each other, and a single man at the bar who was drinking slowly and reading nothing. The 2 by the window are yours, she said. Antoni looked at her across the table. You noticed that fast. You taught me something on the veranda. You scan a room the second you enter it. I've been practicing. She unfolded her napkin. The man at the bar is also yours, but he's more relaxed, so he's been here longer. Probably arrived when you did. Advanced position. A beat of silence. You've been studying, he said. I've been paying attention. Those aren't the same thing. That corner of the mouth movement. She was cataloging those now. They happened when she said something he hadn't predicted. The server returned. Antoni ordered for both of them without asking, which should have been aggravating and somehow wasn't, because he told the server she'll tell you if anything needs to change immediately after, which meant he was efficient, not dismissive. She filed that away. You thought about it, she said. I did. And? He laced his fingers together on the table. The tattoo on his neck caught the low amber light of the restaurant. The bird's wings sharp and dark against his skin, feathers detailed with the kind of precision that spoke of someone who'd sat still for a long time for something that mattered. If I do this, he said, it's not a performance. I don't do halfway measures, and I don't do things that can be undone cleanly if your father decides to make noise. You understand that the moment we're seen together publicly, it becomes real, regardless of what it actually is. I understand. Your father will investigate me. Thoroughly. He already has. That's why you're useful. She held his gaze. A man with your history is exactly the kind of complication that makes a political calculation collapse. Senator Harwick's team won't want the association. My father won't want the headlines. The engagement becomes a liability. And when the pressure mounts, because it will, you stay steady. No second thoughts. No negotiations behind my back. No calling your father to manage it quietly. I wouldn't. People say that before they understand what pressure actually feels like. Then tell me what it feels like, she said. So I understand correctly. He looked at her for a long moment. It feels like receiving information that changes the safety of everyone around you, and knowing that you caused it, and sitting with that without falling apart. His voice was even, completely without drama. That's what pressure feels like on my side of things. It's not abstract. The weight of it arrived exactly as he'd delivered it. Clean, precise, real. People have gotten hurt, she said. Not a question. People have gotten hurt, he confirmed. Because of decisions like this one. Because of decisions, yes. Demi was quiet for a moment. Outside the restaurant's single narrow window, the city moved in its ordinary patterns, cabs and pedestrians, and the indifferent rhythm of a place that didn't register the weight of individual choices. I'm not asking you to protect me from your world, she said finally. I'm asking you to let me use the existence of your world to protect myself from mine. Those are different things. Something shifted in his expression, barely visible. But there. Most people want the first option, he said. Most people haven't grown up watching their father turn everything around him into a negotiating position. She met his eyes. I've been a protected asset my entire life. I know what that costs. He was quiet for a long moment, then. I'll need access to your father's schedule. Not sensitive materials, just movements, public events, private dinners, anything that puts him in a room with the Harbor Commission in the next 6 months. There it was. She'd known there was something. She'd prepared for it. The harbor permits, she said. He didn't react, which was its own reaction. 14 months, she continued. My father's been stalling them. Whatever you're trying to move through that port, it's been sitting in bureaucratic limbo since before I started suspecting this engagement was coming. She tilted her head. Is that why you were at the party? Partially. What's the other part? Senator Harwick, he said, has interests that overlap with mine in ways that don't benefit me. I came to evaluate the situation. And then I walked onto the veranda. And then you walked onto the veranda. She absorbed that. So this arrangement benefits you twice, she said. Most good arrangements do. And me? You get out of a marriage that would have ended whatever you're actually planning to do with your life. He said it without inflection, as if the answer were obvious. That's not a small thing. No, she agreed. It isn't. The food arrived. She ate. He ate. The silence between them had a quality she was still learning to read. It wasn't uncomfortable exactly. It was occupied like two people doing math in the same room. 1 year, she said, setting her fork down. That's the window I need. Long enough that the senator finds another candidate and moves on. Long enough that my father runs out of leverage before I finish my degree and establish my own footing. 1 year, he repeated, with clear terms, public appearances when necessary, enough visibility to make the story credible. No interference in my academic life. No demands on my time that I don't agree to in advance. And from your side? Schedule access. Introduction to the relevant people on my father's staff. I know who handles the commission correspondence. And, she paused, I'll tell you when my father is planning a move against you, because he will. Antoni looked at her steadily. You'd warn me. I'm not protecting him. I made that clear at the coffee shop. Saying it once and meaning it past the first complication are different things. Then I guess, she said, you'll find out which one I am. The silence that followed had a different texture than the ones before it. Something had shifted, not dramatically, not with any visible ceremony, but the conversation had moved from hypothetical to actual, the way weather moves from clouds to rain. He reached into his jacket, set a single folded document on the table between them. She looked at it. What is this? Terms. He slid it toward her. Written. I don't do verbal agreements. She unfolded it. It was 3 pages. Clean legal language, but not a standard contract. Something drafted specifically with specifics she recognized. Duration, public conduct expectations, confidentiality, exit conditions. Her name, his name, dates. She read every line. He waited without filling the silence. Clause 7. Duration of arrangement shall not exceed 12 calendar months from date of signing, unless both parties agree in writing to an extension. Clause 11. Neither party shall make binding public statements regarding the nature of the arrangement without prior mutual consent. Clause 14. All terms are private. Disclosure to third parties, including family members of either party, constitutes breach. She reached the last page, read the final clause twice. Clause 17, she said. Yes. In the event that either party develops circumstances requiring renegotiation, both parties agree to a formal review before any unilateral action is taken. She looked up. That's vague. Intentionally. Why? Because, he said with the patience of someone explaining something he'd already thought through completely, neither of us knows what the next 12 months look like. I don't draft documents that pretend to anticipate everything. I draft documents that give both sides a process. She considered that. It was, she admitted privately, a more sophisticated approach than she'd expected. She folded the document, put it in her bag. I need a lawyer to review this, she said. Obviously. Someone who doesn't report back to my father. I can provide a name. I'll find my own. That corner of the mouth movement again. Fair, he said. She picked up her water glass. Looked at him across the table. This man who ran things in the dark spaces of the city, who had warned her honestly, who had put the terms in writing like someone who believed in the weight of words, even when no court would ever see them. One question, she said. One. Why does the tattoo stop there? She nodded toward his neck. The wings. They disappear below the collar. There's more, isn't there? He was quiet for a moment. Yes. What is it? The rest, he said, is not first meeting information. We've met twice. We've met twice, he agreed. Ask me again when the number is higher. She held his gaze for a beat longer than necessary. Then she nodded, set down her glass, stood. I'll have the contract back to you by Friday, she said. He stood. Again. That automatic courtesy that didn't match anything else about him, and therefore matched everything about him. Friday, he confirmed. She turned to leave. Demi. She stopped. Your father, Antoni said, his voice dropping just slightly in register, is already watching you more carefully than you think. He noticed you on the veranda. He noticed you left early. A pause. Be careful about what you search, who you call, and what you write down for the next 72 hours. She turned halfway. How do you know he noticed? Because I would have noticed. His eyes were level. And we think alike in certain ways. That's not a compliment to either of us, she processed that. Thank you, she said, and meant it. He nodded once. She walked out. Behind her, Antoni sat back down, picked up his water glass, and didn't drink from it. Colt materialized from somewhere near the bar, the advanced position she'd identified correctly, and pulled out the chair she'd just vacated. Well, he said. She took the contract. And the clause 17? Antoni set the glass down. She flagged it immediately. Colt was quiet for a moment. Antoni, the clause gives you room to renegotiate the terms, to extend, to change the structure entirely if... I know what it does. She doesn't. Not yet, he said. Outside, through the narrow window, the street had gone dark. The city's lights reflected in the glass like a second city, inverted and unreachable. She asked about the tattoo, he said almost to himself. Colt blinked. What did you tell her? That it wasn't first meeting information. A long pause. She's going to be a problem, Colt said. Yes, Antoni agreed. He didn't sound concerned. That, Colt decided, was the most concerning thing of all. She signed on a Thursday. The lawyer she found, a sharp, silver-haired woman named Adrienne Cole, who specialized in private contracts and had a reputation for asking exactly the right questions, spent 40 minutes reviewing the document and came back with 2 amendments and a look that said, "I have many questions, but I'm going to bill you instead of asking them." The amendments were minor. Antoni accepted both within the hour. Demi signed at the bottom of page 3, in the office of a neutral firm in a building that had no connection to either of them, with Adrian as witness and nobody else present. It felt less like a beginning and more like the moment before a storm when the air pressure changes and everything gets very quiet. She drove back to campus, sat in her car in the parking structure for 6 minutes, and then went to her afternoon lecture on cognitive behavioral frameworks because her life was strange now, but her GPA was not going to suffer for it. The first public appearance happened 5 days later. Antoni's team, efficient, invisible, communicating exclusively through a scheduling contact named Reed, who wrote in bullet points and used no unnecessary words, had identified a charity gala in the Arts District as the optimal venue. High profile enough to generate photographs, respectable enough that attendance required no explanation, populated by exactly the kind of connected, gossiping, press-adjacent guests who would ensure that 2 sightings became a story by morning. He sent a car. She sent it back and drove herself. Reed's response: noted. She arrived at the gala in a dark green dress she'd chosen because it was hers, bought with her own money, selected without anyone's input, belonging to no narrative except the one she was building. Her hair was down, minimal jewelry, the kind of put together that said I made an effort without saying I was told to. Antoni was waiting near the entrance. He was wearing black, jacket, shirt, everything dark and clean and effortless. The tattoo rose above his collar as always, a constant in the shifting light. He looked at her when she approached with that evaluating attention she'd catalogued twice already, and something in his expression settled, like a variable had resolved. "You drove yourself," he said. "I drive myself everywhere." Reed mentioned. Reed sounds annoyed. Reed is never annoyed. Reed is professionally neutral at all times. He offered his arm. "Shall we give them something to photograph?" She took his arm. The contact was matter-of-fact, practical, and also the first time they had actually touched, she realized, which was a detail she catalogued and then firmly set aside. "Ground rules," she said as they moved toward the entrance. "Don't answer questions about how we met. Say it was private and change the subject. I know how to handle press." "I know you do. I'm telling you what I'll say so our answers match." He glanced at her sideways. "You prepared talking points. I prepared a consistent narrative. There's a difference." "Is there?" "One is spin, the other is architecture, that corner of the mouth movement." "Architecture," he said. "Don't laugh." "I'm not laughing. You're doing the thing with your mouth." "I don't know what you're referring to," he said, with the complete composure of someone who knew exactly what she was referring to. They walked through the doors. The room registered them in the way rooms register things they find interesting. A ripple, quiet and immediate, spreading outward from the point of their arrival. She felt it. The slight recalibration of attention, the turned heads, the conversations that paused a half-beat before resuming at a slightly different pitch. She had grown up in rooms like this. She knew how to move through them. What she hadn't anticipated was how different it felt to move through one beside him. Antoni occupied space with a specific gravity that she hadn't fully clocked until now, when it was operating at full scale in a crowded room. People didn't approach him randomly. They calculated first. They waited for an opening, or they manufactured one, and they came at specific angles with specific agendas visible in the way they composed their faces before making contact. She watched him manage 4 of these approaches in 20 minutes. Smooth, unhurried, giving nothing while appearing to give everything. A city councilman who wanted something, a developer who owed something, a woman in a red dress who clearly had history with him and masked it well, except that she touched her collarbone when she spoke, which was a self-soothing gesture that meant something had once mattered. Demi noted all of it without appearing to. Between the 3rd and 4th approach, Antoni leaned slightly toward her. You've been reading everyone in this room since we walked in, he said, low, for her only. You've been doing the same thing. I have reasons. So do I. She accepted a glass of champagne from a passing tray. The woman in red. She knows you. A pause. Old business, he said. She's still watching you. Most people watch me. It's not always meaningful. She's watching us, Demi corrected. There's a difference. She's recalibrating something. He was quiet for a moment. Her name is Vivian Holt, he said. Her family and mine have overlapping interests in 3 different markets. She expected to have a specific role in my life by now. He said it without apology or excess detail. She's reassessing. Because of me. Because of you. Is that a problem? It's a complication. He looked at her directly. I'm telling you because you'll notice her again, and I'd rather you have context than theories. She appreciated that more than she was prepared to show. Does she have the kind of problem with complications that becomes a problem for other people? She asked carefully. Vivian is ambitious and she's proud. She's not dangerous. You said that with the confidence of a man who's never been underestimated by someone who had reason to. He looked at her. She looked back. I'll keep an eye on it, he said. Good. Across the room, a camera flash went off. Then another. She didn't look toward them. Neither did he. They both understood that was exactly the point. Her father called at 11:15 that night. She was home, shoes off, sitting on her bed reviewing case study notes, when the phone buzzed with the contact photo she'd assigned him years ago, the official gubernatorial portrait, which was an accurate representation of how their relationship had functioned for most of her life. She let it ring twice, then answered, Hey, Dad. Where were you tonight? His voice was controlled, the dangerous kind of controlled. A gala in the Arts District. It was for the city's Youth Arts Foundation. Very respectable. You were photographed with Antoni Reeves. I was. Silence. Demi. The word carried the full weight of a man who was not accustomed to being navigated. What are you doing? Going to charity events. Meeting people. She kept her voice light, factual, unbothered. Isn't that what you've been telling me to do for years? Expand my network. Understand the city. Reeves is not a network. Reeves is a what? The silence on his end had texture. She could hear him choosing. He is not someone appropriate for you to be associated with. She turned a page in her case study notes. That's interesting, because he was at your party 3 weeks ago, the engagement dinner. You invited him. That was a business context. This is different. How is it different? Because the photographs look like what? She kept her voice steady. Like I'm making my own choices. Demi. The word came out harder this time. I want you to come home this weekend. We'll discuss this in person. I have midterms. Saturday morning. This is not optional. She closed her case study notes. I'll check my schedule, she said, and ended the call. She texted Antoni. He called. Faster than I expected. The reply came in under 3 minutes. What did he say? Wants me home Saturday. Called it non-optional. Are you going? She looked at the ceiling for a moment. Haven't decided. What would you do? A longer pause this time. She could almost feel the weight of him thinking on the other end of the line. Go. Let him talk. Don't agree to anything. Come back and tell me what he's actually afraid of. Not what he says he's afraid of. She read it twice. Those are different things? Always. She set the phone on the nightstand and lay back on the bed. Her father had called in under 3 hours. That was faster than she'd calculated, which meant the photographs had circulated faster and been seen by the right people faster, and the pressure on the senator's team would already be building. The plan was working. She should have felt satisfied. Instead, she was thinking about the woman in the red dress, recalibrating her expectations. About Clause 17 in the renegotiation window she still hadn't fully parsed. about the tattoo that disappeared below the collar, and the answer she'd been told to earn. She was building a profile. That was all. Standard psychological practice. Understand the person you're working with. Map their patterns. Identify the gaps. The gap that bothered her was the one she couldn't explain yet. Why a man who operated through precision and privacy had handed her a contract with a clause he knew she'd flag. Why he'd warned her honestly, twice, when it cost him nothing to simply say yes and let her find out later. People who were planning to deceive you didn't usually pre-announce the shape of their character. Or they did, she thought. And they were very good at it. She went home Saturday. The governor's mansion in the morning felt different than it did at night. Flatter, more institutional, stripped of the atmospheric lighting that made everything look like a set piece. Her father was in the formal sitting room, not the office, which was a choice. The sitting room was where he put people he wanted to feel like guests rather than opponents. He was alone. That was also a choice. "Sit down," he said. She sat. He looked at her the way he looked at things that required management, with the particular attention of a man who had spent his career identifying pressure points. "Antony Reeves," he began, "is under federal observation. Has been for years. His acquittal was procedural, not exculpatory. The people around him have histories that you are not equipped to understand. You invited him to your party. I manage relationships with people like Reeves. That's different from my daughter, being seen with him publicly. Yes, because it complicates things. Because it's dangerous." He leaned forward. "I'm not talking about politics, Demi. I'm talking about the kind of men who orbit someone like Reeves. The kind of situations that—" "Senator Harwick," she said. He stopped. Senator Harwick is 62 years older than the intern he had removed from his staff 2 years ago. I know because I looked. She held her father's gaze without blinking. I know because when someone tries to sell me a decision as protection, I check what it's actually protecting. She paused. You're not concerned about who I'm spending time with. You're concerned that I found a way out of the box you built. The silence that followed was the longest one they'd had in years. Her father sat back. His expression didn't collapse. Richard Calloway's expression never collapsed. But something behind it shifted, the way tectonic things shift. Slowly, completely, and with consequences that would take time to fully surface. "This conversation isn't over," he said. "I know." She stood, smoothed her jacket. "But I have a study group at 2, so the rest will have to wait." She left before he could respond. In her car, hands on the wheel, she sat in the driveway for 30 seconds and let the adrenaline move through her system the way she'd learned to let difficult things move. Acknowledge, process, release. Then she drove. That evening, the story ran in 2 city blogs and 1 political newsletter. Governor's daughter and Reeves' heir, New York's most complicated +1. By morning, Senator Harwick's communications director had made 3 calls that were not returned. By noon, the senator's team had quietly requested a meeting with the governor. By 4 p.m., Richard Calloway was standing at the window of his office with the expression of a man who had spent 30 years building a particular kind of order and was watching someone dismantle it from the inside. He picked up his phone. He did not call his daughter. He called the one person in the city who had more information on Antony Reeves than the federal government. And he said, "I need everything. And I need it fast." The man her father hired had a name that didn't matter and a method that did. Demi found out about him on a Tuesday, when Priya called her between classes with the careful voice she used when she had information she didn't want to deliver. "Someone's been asking about you," Priya said. Not casually, the kind of asking where they already know the answers and they're testing to see what other people know. "Who?" "I don't know who he's working for. But he talked to your roommate from sophomore year, your academic advisor. That professor you had a conflict with over your research methodology paper." A pause. "Demi, that's a pattern. I know what it is. It's a background investigation." "I know. Your father?" She was standing outside the psychology building, backpack over one shoulder, watching a group of students cross the quad with the ordinary ease of people whose Tuesday was just a Tuesday. "Yes," she said. "What are you going to do?" "I'm going to let him run it," she said, "because there's nothing to find." That was true, and it was also not entirely the point. She told Antoni that evening they had established a rhythm without formally establishing a rhythm, which was its own kind of information. Twice a week, variable locations, always her suggestion or his through Reed, never a pattern that could be predicted or photographed too consistently, enough visibility to sustain the narrative, enough distance to sustain the terms. Tonight was a walk. His suggestion, which had surprised her, she'd expected another controlled environment, a restaurant with sightlines and advanced positions. Instead, Reed had sent an address near the river, a public park, 7 p.m. He was already there when she arrived, standing at the railing above the water with his jacket open despite the October cold, looking at the far bank with the expression he wore when he was processing something. She came to stand beside him. "My father hired someone to investigate me," she said. "I know." She turned her head. "You know. His name is Patrick Drum. He's a former state investigator who does private work for political clients. He's thorough, he's discreet, and he's been active since last Thursday." Antoni kept his eyes on the water. "I was going to tell you tonight. How long have you known?" "Since Friday." "That's 4 days. I needed to understand the scope first. There's a difference between telling you someone is looking and telling you what they're looking for." He turned to face her. "Drum isn't building a case against you. He's building one against me. You're the pathway." She absorbed that. "He's looking for leverage," she said. "He's looking for something your father can use to make continuing this arrangement more costly than ending it. A federal connection, a liability. Something that lets him walk into a room and say, 'This is what your name is attached to,' and watch the calculation change. Will he find anything?" The question landed between them with its full weight. Antoni looked at her steadily. "Nothing that touches you directly," he said. "But nothing that makes your father feel better about this either. The investigation will confirm what he already suspects about me, and then he'll use it." "How?" "That depends on how far he's willing to go." A pause. "Your father is a careful man. He won't move until he has something solid. But when he does move, it will be fast, and it will be designed to create a situation where you have to choose publicly. A situation where standing by you costs more than walking away." "Yes." The river moved below them, dark and indifferent. Somewhere across the water, a barge was navigating the channel, its lights steady and slow. "He doesn't know you yet," she said. "What?" "My father. He's investigating you like you're a problem to be solved. He doesn't understand that you planned for him to do exactly this." She looked at Antoni. "Did you?" "A beat. I planned for resistance," he said carefully. "The specific form it takes matters." "Clause 17, she said. He was very still. "The renegotiation window," she continued. "I've been thinking about it since I signed. You drafted that clause with room to change the terms, extend, restructure." She turned to face him fully. "Why does a man who wrote everything else with precision leave that one clause open?" The pause that followed was the longest he'd given her. "Because," he said, "I draft documents that account for variables I can't predict at the time of signing." That's the diplomatic answer. It's the accurate one. Is it the complete one? He looked at her. In the low light of the Riverwalk, with the city's ambient glow behind him, she could see the line of the tattoo against his neck, the wings still mid-flight, the story still unfinished below the collar. "No," he said. "It isn't." The honesty of that landed differently than she'd expected. Not a confession, not a reveal. Just a man who had decided not to lie when the direct question arrived. "You should know," she said quietly, "that I respond better to the truth delivered badly than to a comfortable version of it. I'm learning that. Then tell me what the clause is actually for." He turned back to the water. put both hands on the railing. She watched the tension in his shoulders, not the kind that came from threat, the kind that came from deciding. I took this arrangement because it gave me access to your father's schedule and a path to the harbor permits, he said. That was the calculation on day one. Clean, contained, temporary. A pause. The clause exists because by the second meeting I was already aware that my calculation had a variable I hadn't accounted for. Me. You. The word sat between them without decoration. Antoni, she said carefully. I'm not asking anything of you, he said, and the steadiness of it was important. It wasn't a deflection. It was a boundary he was drawing for himself as much as for her. I'm telling you because you asked and because you deserve the honest answer. The clause gives me room to request a renegotiation. It doesn't obligate you to agree to one. She looked at his profile. 2 months ago, she had sat on the edge of her bed and looked at a dress that represented everything she was losing. She had walked onto a veranda and found an exit she hadn't expected. She had built a plan from scratch using the tools she had: intelligence, nerve, and the willingness to walk toward the complicated thing rather than around it. She had not planned for this variable either. Ask me again when the number is higher, she said. He turned. What? The tattoo. You told me to ask when the number of meetings was higher. She held his gaze. What's the rest of it? Something moved across his face. Not the corner of the mouth movement. Something deeper. Something that had been sitting below the surface of all those measured silences. He straightened, reached up and pulled the collar of his shirt down slightly, just enough. Below the bird's wings, across his collarbone and down toward his left shoulder, the rest of the image resolved. The bird wasn't flying. It was landing, wings fully extended, feet just touching down, the moment of arrival preserved in ink. I got it at 22, he said. When I took over what my father left behind before I understood what taking it over actually meant. I thought it was about freedom, landing somewhere on your own terms. He let the collar go. It took me a few more years to understand that landing somewhere always costs something. The bird doesn't know that yet. I left it that way on purpose. Demi didn't say anything for a moment. That's the most you've told me about yourself, she said. Don't make it strange. I'm not. I'm cataloging. Of course you are. It's a coping mechanism. For what? For the fact, she said, that I also have a variable I didn't account for. The silence that settled between them was different from any of the ones before. It wasn't occupied, it wasn't weighted. It was the kind of silence that happens when two people arrive at the same coordinates from different directions and take a moment to confirm the map. Neither of them moved toward it. That restraint was its own kind of information. 3 days later, her father's counter-move arrived. Not the way she'd expected, but the way she should have. It didn't come from Richard Calloway directly. It came from Senator Harwick's chief of staff, a woman named Bernadette Marsh, who requested a private lunch with Demi under the pretense of a courtesy conversation. Demi went, because information was information regardless of the source. Bernadette was 50, precise, and had the particular energy of someone delivering a message they had been paid to deliver without fingerprints. The senator remains interested, Bernadette said, over a salad she didn't touch. Despite the current situation. He understands that young women sometimes make impulsive choices, and he's a patient man. That's generous of him, Demi said. He's also prepared to be flexible about the timeline. Your degree, your program. All of it accommodated. Also generous. In return, Bernadette set her fork down, a quiet withdrawal from the current public situation. No announcement necessary, simply a natural fading, within 30 days. Demi looked at her. And if the natural fading doesn't occur? Bernadette's expression didn't change. Mr. Reeves, she said carefully, operates in spaces that attract significant scrutiny. The kind that can become concentrated very quickly when the right people apply the right pressure. The senator has relationships with those people. A pause. This is not a threat. It's a context. It's a threat, Demi thought. delivered by someone who knows exactly how to make a threat sound like a weather forecast. "I'll think about it," she said, and smiled the way her mother had taught her to smile. She was in her car before she texted Antoni. "They just threatened you through me." Harwick's office. Concentrated federal scrutiny, their words. The reply came in 90 seconds. How direct was it? Deniable, but clear. "Are you okay?" She looked at the question. 2 words. The first time in their entire acquaintance that he'd asked her something with no tactical component whatsoever. "Yes," she typed. "Are you?" A longer pause. "This means your father and Harwick are coordinating. They're not just applying pressure. They're synchronizing it. That's a different level." "I know." "Demi." "I know," she typed again. "I said I understood what pressure felt like. I meant it." The pause this time was long enough that she started the car and pulled out of the parking lot. His reply arrived as she reached the first intersection. "Come to the office, not for business, just come." She sat at the red light. Around her the city moved in its ordinary patterns. Cabs and pedestrians and the unremarkable rhythm of people who had no idea what was happening in the particular sliver of Tuesday she was currently occupying. The light turned green. She turned left instead of right. Toward him. In the governor's mansion, Richard Calloway ended a call, set his phone on the desk, and looked at the report Patrick Drum had delivered that morning. 40 pages. Thorough. Exactly what he'd asked for. He turned to the last section, the one Drum had flagged with a single line at the top. Recommend elevated attention. He read it twice. Then he picked up his phone again and made a call that had nothing to do with politics. "I need a conversation," he said, when the line connected. "About what my daughter has walked into." A pause on the other end. "Does she know?" the voice asked. "No," said the governor. And that's the problem. The office was on the 14th floor. Not the building she'd imagined. No unmarked entrance. No deliberate anonymity. Just a clean, modern space in a tower that housed 12 other legitimate businesses, which was, she was beginning to understand, exactly the point. The most effective concealment wasn't darkness. It was ordinary light. Colt met her at the elevator, said nothing beyond this way, which she appreciated because she wasn't in the mood for managed hospitality. Antoni was standing at the window when she entered. The same posture she'd seen at the restaurant, looking at the city like it was a problem he was still working out. He turned when she came in, looked at her face, read something there that made him cross the room in 4 steps and stop just short of reaching for her, which told her everything about what he wanted to do and exactly how much control he was exercising not to do it. "Sit down," he said. "I'm fine standing." "Demi." "I said I'm fine." He looked at her for a moment. Then he pulled out a chair from the conference table and sat on the edge of it himself, which meant they were at the same level, which she understood was deliberate. "Tell me exactly what Bernadette Marsh said," he said. She told him. Word for word, because she had rehearsed it in the car on the way over, because precision was the thing she reached for when everything else felt unstable. When she finished, he was quiet. "The federal angle isn't new," he said. "They've tried concentrated scrutiny before. It produces noise, not results. My legal structure is built to absorb it." He paused. "What concerns me is the coordination. Your father and Harwick running the same place simultaneously means someone gave them a common strategy. That requires a shared advisor. Someone who knows both sides well enough to connect them." "Yes." She looked at him. "Drum's report," she said. "The 40 pages my father ordered. You know what's in it." "I know what's in most things that circulate about me." He met her eyes. "Yes. Is there something in it I should know?" The pause was a fraction too long. "Antoni." "There's a section," he said, "that flags a connection between my operations and a rival group that's been active in the Northeast Corridor for the past 18 months. The Vanek Network. They've been moving into markets that overlap with mine, and creating situations designed to look like my fingerprints. He kept his voice level. Drum's report almost certainly attributes 2 of those situations to me directly. They weren't mine. But they look like yours. They were designed to. Who's behind the Vanek network? That, he said, is the question I've been working on for 8 months. She absorbed that. The room was quiet except for the ambient hum of the building and the distant city below the windows. This is why the harbor permits matter, she said slowly. It's not just business. Whatever comes through that port is a clean line. Documented, inspected, legitimate. Every record verifiable. His jaw tightened slightly. If someone is building a case that attributes Vanek's movements to me, a clean port record is one of the few things that directly contradicts it. You need the permits to protect yourself. I need the permits, he said, because someone is building a very careful story about who I am, and I am running out of clean pages to write the true version on. The weight of that landed fully. She sat down across from him, not because she needed to, because it felt right to be at the same level for what she was about to say. My father's last call, she said. The one at the end of the report. He said I'd walked into something I didn't know about. She looked at Antoni directly. What don't I know? He held her gaze. Then he stood, walked to the desk in the corner, opened a drawer, and came back with a single photograph, placed it on the table between them. It was a surveillance image, grainy, time-stamped 8 months ago. 2 men outside a building she didn't recognize. One of them was someone she didn't know. The other was Senator Harwick. Harwick, she said, meeting with Dmitry Vanek's financial liaison. Twice in 6 months. Antoni's voice was completely flat. The senator isn't just your father's political ally. He's been providing regulatory cover to the Vanek network for at least 2 years, blocking investigations, redirecting federal attention. He paused. Your father doesn't know this. What he knows is that I have something on Harwick. He doesn't know what. Everything rearranged itself. That's why Harwick wants me out of your orbit, she said. It's not about the engagement. It's because if I'm close to you, eventually I see something, or you tell me something, and I become a liability to him specifically. Yes. And my father is being used. He thinks he's protecting me. He's actually running interference for a man who... Yes. She sat back. Her father for all his faults, and she had catalogued them with the thoroughness of someone who had grown up in their shadow, was not a corrupt man. He was a man who traded in power, who had made her a piece in a game without her consent, who had built his career on negotiations she'd never agreed to. But he was not the senator. He was not Vanek. He had called someone after reading Drum's report and said, she's walked into something she doesn't know about. He was afraid for her. That didn't excuse what he'd done, but it was real. You have to tell him, she said. Antoni looked at her. About Harwick. She met his eyes. I know what it costs you. The leverage disappears the moment you hand it over. But my father is making decisions based on incomplete information. And some of those decisions are directed at you. And if this keeps escalating, Demi, he's going to do something that can't be undone, she said. You know I'm right. The silence was long. If I give him the photograph, Antoni said carefully, he severs from Harwick. The engagement is finished. The political alliance collapses, and your father spends the next 6 months managing the fallout, which keeps him too occupied to concentrate on the harbor permits. I know. That serves me. I know that too. She held his gaze. Does it bother you? That doing the right thing also happens to benefit you? Depends on the reason it's being done. What reason are you doing it for? He looked at her for a long moment. Because you asked me to, he said. Simply. Finally. Without the architecture of strategy around it. The meeting with her father happened the following morning. Antoni didn't come. That was her call, and he respected it without argument, which was, she was finding, one of his consistent qualities. He disagreed sometimes. He said so directly, but he didn't override. She sat across from Richard Calloway in the formal sitting room, his choice again, guest positioning, and put the photograph on the coffee table between them. He looked at it for a long time. "Where did you get this?" he said. Not a question. "Does it matter?" "Yes." "Antoni." She let the name sit there without defense or apology. "He's had it for 8 months. He didn't use it publicly. He didn't leverage it against the senator's office directly. He gave it to me to give to you because I asked him to." Her father looked up. "Why would he do that?" "Because," she said, "not everyone with a complicated history is the villain in your story, Dad." The silence that followed was different from all the others. Richard Calloway looked at his daughter. Really looked, the way people look when they've been operating on an old version of someone and the current version finally comes into focus. "The engagement," he said, "is over. Has been for weeks, actually. Harwick's team already knows the senator needs a different path." She folded her hands in her lap. "What you need to decide now is what you do with that photograph. And whether you're going to keep running investigations into a man who handed you the thing that protects you, or whether you're going to let me make my own decisions. He's still—" "I know what he is," she said quietly. "I've known from the beginning. I'm not naive and I'm not in danger. And I'm asking you to trust that I understand the difference between a risk I've assessed and one I've walked into blindly." She paused. "Those are different things." Her father looked at the photograph again. "I owe you an apology," he said. The words came out with the particular difficulty of a man who didn't use them often enough to make them easy. "Yes," she said. "You do. Demi, I'm not ready to accept it yet." She stood. "But I will be." She picked up her bag. "Give me some time." She left before he could find the words for what came next. She drove to the river, parked at the same point where she and Antoni had stood 3 weeks ago, got out, walked to the railing, put her hands on the cold metal and looked at the water and let everything she'd been holding, the plan, the pressure, the variables she'd mapped and the ones she hadn't, move through her in the way she'd learned to let difficult things move. She heard footsteps, looked left. Antoni was leaning against the same column he'd occupied, jacket open, hands in his pockets, the tattoo visible above his collar. He looked at her with that evaluating attention she'd stopped trying to decode and started simply receiving. "Reed told you I was here?" she said. "I was already here," he said. "I come here sometimes." "Why?" "Because the river doesn't want anything from me." She looked at him. He looked at her. Between them, the air had that quality it had been building toward for weeks. Not charged, not tense. Settled. The way things feel when they arrive somewhere real. "The contract," she said. "What about it?" "Clause 17. The renegotiation window." She turned to face him. "I want to invoke it." He was very still. "You want to renegotiate?" he said. "I want to renegotiate the terms." She held his gaze. The original arrangement was built on what we both needed then. Those needs have changed. Or, she paused, they've been joined by something else. And I'd rather address that in writing like two people who believe words have weight, than let it sit in the space between us until it becomes something neither of us chose deliberately. He looked at her for a long moment. "What are the new terms?" he said. His voice was careful, not guarded. Careful, the way he was careful with things that mattered. "The harbor permits," she said. "My father will clear them. Not as a trade, as an acknowledgement that he's been operating on bad information and that Reeves Industries has been used as a target by people with worse intentions than yours. That happens through legitimate channels, on record. And I finish my degree. I start my internship in the spring. I build what I'm building on my own terms." She took a breath. "And you stop operating like this arrangement has an expiration date, because I think we both know it passed that point a while ago." Antoni looked at her. The city moved behind him. The ordinary, indifferent, continuous motion of a place that didn't register individual choices. Below them, the river ran dark and steady. "That last term," he said. "Yes." "You're sure?" "I catalogued you from the veranda," she said. "Patient, careful, honest when it costs something, dangerous in ways I understand and ways I'm still learning, which is not the same as dangerous in ways that should stop me." She paused. "I don't make decisions without sufficient data. I have sufficient data." Something in his expression opened, not dramatically, not with performance, just quietly, the way a room changes when someone finally turns on the light. "The bird on my neck," he said, "is landing." It took me a long time to understand that landing somewhere was the point, not a concession, not a limitation. He moved toward her, stopped close enough that the distance between them was deliberate and thin. "The point. I know," she said. "I figured that out 2 weeks ago." "Of course you did. Don't be annoyed." "I'm not annoyed." "You're doing the thing with your jaw." "I don't have a thing with my jaw." "You absolutely have a thing with your jaw." He looked at her with the full weight of everything he'd spent the last 3 months not saying. Then he reached up and tucked a strand of blonde hair behind her ear with a gentleness that had nothing managed about it. No strategy, no positioning, just a man who had spent his whole life in rooms where everything was calculated, finally doing something because he wanted to. "New terms," he said quietly. "New terms." She agreed. 8 months later, the harbor permits cleared on a Wednesday in June. Demi was sitting in her internship supervisor's office reviewing case notes when Antoni's text arrived. 2 words, which was more than he usually used for good news. It cleared. She looked at the message for a moment, smiled at it in the way she was glad nobody could see. "Told you," she typed back. "You tell me everything. Someone has to." A pause. Then, "Dinner tonight? Your choice." Somewhere without a sight line to the kitchen door. Impossible standard. Try anyway. She put the phone away and went back to her case notes. Outside the window, the city was doing what it always did. Moving, indifferent, continuous, populated by 10 million people navigating their own choices. Senator Harwick had withdrawn from the presidential race in March, citing personal reasons. The Vanek network was under active federal investigation by April, following an anonymous tip that arrived with remarkably organized documentation. Patrick Drum had returned to private work. Bernadette Marsh had taken a position with a lobbying firm in Washington. Richard Calloway had called his daughter on her birthday in April. They had talked for 22 minutes, which was the longest personal conversation they'd had in 3 years. It was not fixed, but it was something. Adrian Cole, the silver-haired lawyer, had drafted the new agreement. 3 pages, clean language, specific terms, some practical, some not. Some that made Adrian set her pen down and look over her glasses and say, "I have many questions," before going back to billing. Colt had read the new contract, looked at Antoni across the conference table and said, "You're aware this is not a business document." Antoni had said, "I'm aware." Colt had signed as witness without further comment, which was, for Colt, the equivalent of a standing ovation. That evening, Demi stood at the window of Antoni's apartment, their apartment now, a detail that had happened gradually and then all at once, the way real things happen, and looked at the city below. He came to stand behind her, put his hands on her shoulders with the ease of someone who had stopped calculating every point of contact and started simply existing in them. She could feel the warmth of him, the steadiness. Below his collar, the bird had landed. "What are you thinking?" he said. "That I walked onto a veranda 8 months ago looking for an exit," she said, "and found an entrance instead." He was quiet for a moment. "I came to that party to assess a political situation," he said. "I left thinking about a woman who gripped a railing like it was the only thing between her and a full sprint to freedom. It was. I know." He turned her gently and looked at her the way he'd been looking at her since the river, since the new terms, since the moment he'd stopped managing the distance. "I'm glad you didn't run." "I calculated the risk," she said. The data was compelling. "Demi." "What?" "Stop cataloging and just he said, and kissed her in the way that had no strategy in it, no clause, no term. Just the weight of something real, chosen deliberately by two people who understood exactly what they were landing toward. Outside, the city moved. Inside, everything was still. Some contracts are written to expire. Some are written to become something the original terms never anticipated. The difference, as any good psychologist will tell you, is what both people choose to do with Clause 17.